All right, good morning, everyone, once again. Welcome to our panelists. And at the end of this presentation, there's going to be a raffle for a disaster preparedness bundle donated by Home Depot in St. Lucie West, as well as 2 Midland emergency weather radios. So make sure you got a raffle ticket when you came in the door from one of our event staff. You can see them back there in the corner if you didn't get one. I'm pleased to introduce you to the emergency managers from the City of Port St. Lucie, St. Lucie County, Martin County, Okeechobee County, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management. With over 150 years of experience collectively, they will share their knowledge to help you be better prepared for this year's hurricane season and the other hazards that we face. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Shane Ratliff, the Emergency Operations CRS Manager for the City of Port St. Lucie's Office of Emergency Management. To my right, Billy Weinshank. He's the Emergency Management Division Director for the City of Port St. Lucie. Just past Sally, we have Oscar Hance, the Emergency Management Division Manager for St. Lucie County. And then we have Sally Waite, the Emergency Management Director for Martin County. We have Karen Kozak on the end there. She is the Emergency Management Director for Okeechobee County. And then finally, we have Mason Kozak. Notice they have the same last name? There is a relation there. Who is the Region 8 Response Coordinator for the Florida Division of Emergency Management. All right, so I'm going to go over the structure of the panel real quick so that everybody understands how we ask them and who's going to answer and all that. Why is mine so much feedback? Everybody else's is good, but mine's got feedback now.
Yeah. To this side right here. See if that's better.
All right. So questions will be directed to one emergency manager on the panel, and after they respond, we welcome input from the other emergency managers. We gather these questions via emails and conversations that our panel members have been asked about emergency management and preparedness topics, and we've incorporated them into this panel today. If anyone in the audience does have questions related to the topics discussed, please hold your questions until the end, and if there's enough time left, we will open the floor to answer those questions. You can also talk to any of our emergency managers one-on-one throughout the expo today as they are available. All right, so I'm going to ask the questions. I'll start with the first one. For the sake of time management, we're going to address each question to one panel member and then ask the rest if they have anything to add. Number 1, Martin County. Sally's up. All right, what are the unique hurricane-related challenges that the Treasure Coast faces compared to other regions of Florida?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the storm surge. We have a large coastal community here in the Treasure Coast, and also the state's, the Treasure Coast new population of people that have come down to Florida puts a lot more people in harm's way. The heavy rainfall that we've experienced, we've recently learned that inland flooding is now the #1 cause of death during storms. So there's many challenges that we face, and obviously since last year's tornadic activity, we are now facing tornadoes and heavy winds.
All right, did anybody else want to add anything to that before I move on? Billy, go ahead.
Just for the city, does this work? Yeah.
There we go.
All right. There's 3 things adding to what Sally said. We haven't had a direct hit in Port St. Lucie or the area since 2003. So a lot of people like, oh, it's not, we have some juju and it's not going to hit us. It's not true, so always be ready. It just takes one storm, so always be ready. Avoid complacency. Another issue, it's not an issue, it's a thing, is that we have a lot of new residents who don't have experience. So I'm glad to see such a good turnout today, telling me that people are coming out, learning what they want to do, need to do. So that's good. Thanks.
All right. Second question is addressed to Oscar, St. Lucie County. How has hurricane preparedness in the Treasure Coast area evolved in recent years, particularly in terms of technology and communications?
Recent years. There are a lot of new tools available to us, and not only to us, but to organizations like the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center. Advancements in technology make it easier for us to communicate with each other, with other agencies. Social media is huge. It's a great tool to get the message out. Everybody seems to like going to Facebook or Twitter to find the latest and greatest news. And so we utilize that a lot with our communications division, and in partnership with Martin County, Indian River County, Okeechobee, City of Port St. Lucie, we all get together and make sure we're pushing the same message, and we use different outlets to do that, including social media. And then we have software that we use internally at the county's Emergency Operations Center that helps us communicate with the state, request resources with the state, request resources from Port St. Lucie, communicate with all the different agencies across the state. Across the state. So technology plays a huge role. We are prepared if that technology fails. We could always revert back to pen and paper. That's okay. We're good with that, and we're prepared for that. We can always revert back to ham radios if we have to. So all of the old stuff's still there. It's all ready to use, but the new technology does make it easier.
All right, did anyone else want to add on to that? All right. All right, so number 3, this is for Billy, City of Port St. Lucie. What role does the local community play in hurricane preparedness, and how can residents better support emergency management efforts?
You all are right now by being here. The more you know and the more prepared you are, the easier it's going to be for us, right? So people that don't have food, don't have water, don't have their medicines, etc., like ready, are going to need more service than everybody else, and we only have X amount of people to send out. So the more prepared residents are, especially for those first 48 hours to week post-storm, the easier it is on you and the easier it is on us. We're here to help, we want to help, but we only have X amount of resources. That being said, I'll just give you like 4 quick tips. Stay informed, have your local media, and we say local, it's not time for national. They're a little sensationalistic about storms, but your local media will give you the straight deal. So tune into your local media, know your zone, know your home. Oscar said that yesterday. We were talking. So know your zone. Know if you live in a surge zone or a flood zone. If you're told to evacuate, leave, please. That's, as Sally said before, most deaths in hurricane are caused by water. And water is caused by surge or aerial, which is rain. Either one can, once that water gets in your house and keeps rising, it can be really bad. So know your zone, know your home. If your home's like a modular home, a mobile home, a home built of wood, not of concrete block, if your roof isn't tied in, answer all those questions now, not like when the storm comes. And if your home is not built to withstand what we're expecting, have an alternate plan. It doesn't mean fly to like New York. You can just go to your neighbor's house or whatever, and build a kit. Make sure, each family's kit is going to be a little bit different. So build a kit, enough supplies for 1 week. If you have prescription meds, get those filled. Once the governor calls a state of emergency, this is like a little known secret, but I'm gonna let you know, it's in statute. You can get your meds filled immediately. So keep those meds filled and then have a plan. I'll share something personal to give you the importance of it. We have a plan. I talk about this stuff. My poor wife's back there now. Talk about this stuff all the time. And I got my kids are not little. They're older because I'm old. I'm part of that 150 years experience, But my kids are like 20 and up. And they were all home during Milton. All my kids were home, and Susie's mother and grandmother were there, and we had a tornado. We live in Fort Pierce, so we were one of those EF3s, and tore the roof off, destroyed our house. Everybody's okay, happy ending, but we had a plan. We told our kids, our in-laws knew, if you hear, because we knew the tornadoes were coming, right? You just turn on the news, you knew. If you hear like a freight train, if you feel a change in air pressure, like you do when you're flying, get to the safe room. Everybody knew the safe rooms. And because of that, everybody made it through okay. So I hope that accentuates the importance of having your own family plan. Also contacts, those people up north or, out west, wherever they are. People are gonna wanna know if you're okay after the storm. Try and figure out a way to get in touch with them, If cellular's down, what app do you all use? Facebook, Instagram, whatever. So build a kit, know your zone, get a plan, and stay informed. 4 things that we tell you, and please remember it. It's pretty catchy. That's it.
All right, thank you, Billy. Did anybody have anything else to add on to that? Okay, go ahead, Sally.
Since we're talking about tornadoes and planning, it's just really important, and we've been really stressing this with all of our public outreach events, to prepare and plan earlier this time going forward. During Hurricane Milton, and not every storm is going to be Hurricane Milton, and we're not all going to have all these tornado touchdowns all the time. May never happen again. But I think we concentrate so much on the cone that we stopped concentrating on the impacts of the storm. So while we were having people driving to shelters, we were having tornadoes on the street. So get your stuff done early, get prepared, be snuggled in someplace, ahead of time now, instead of waiting to the last minute.
Shane, if I may.
Yeah.
This is a very important question, and I'm glad it's in here. FEMA's gonna look different. Y'all need to know that. FEMA's gonna look different moving forward. Is that better? Can you hear me now? All right. So FEMA's gonna look different moving forward. Don't expect the same response we saw during Milton. So what the community can do is be better prepared, be prepared early, help each other out, because the responsibility is gonna fall on the locals and on the state. So the more prepared you are, and the more prepared your neighbors are, the better we can respond to those who need the help the most. So please pay attention to that. FEMA's gonna look different. So don't expect FEMA coming knocking at the door after the storm passes. They're not gonna be here. So it's very important. It's very important. We'll hold the questions till the end, please. It's very important that you guys are prepared so that we can help those who need it.
Thank you, Oscar. All right, number 4, we're going to Okeechobee County. Can you walk us through the steps emergency managers take in the lead up to a hurricane? How do you prioritize resource allocation and evacuation planning?
So with steps leading up to decision-making processes in the resources and evacuation process. To start with, emergency managers are, when we are preparing for a tropical weather event, community safety is always the highest priority, and that drives the decision-making process for us as emergency managers. Emergency managers coordinate calls with the National Weather Service to determine potential rain, wind, storm surge impacts in our communities. With plans in place, emergency managers and community partners are able to implement protective actions based upon unique circumstances of each storm. Communication with the public is important. So kind of going into some of the things that have been highlighted already, please make sure that you check the emergency management page of the county that you live in or that you're visiting in, so you understand how that community communicates with the visitors or residents. So how does emergency management share messaging in that community? Tropical weather systems impact multiple counties simultaneously. We've seen that with all of the hurricanes, and especially highlighted this past year, which means a high number of similar resources will be deployed and requested across multiple counties at the same time. So for us, communication with first responders, neighboring counties, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management is vital for coordinating limited resources to support a safe and timely response. For Okeechobee, in consideration of evacuation planning, even though we're not a coastal community, we have residents and visitors residing in mobile homes, RVs, and in flood-prone areas who could be advised to evacuate. Additionally, we are not a coastal community, so residents from the east or west coast could evacuate inland, which means they could come into Okeechobee County. Our evacuation planning then becomes twofold. Our residents who may need to potentially evacuate, and we may need to host evacuees from neighboring counties. Timing of evacuation activities will take into account all potential protective actions of what our neighboring counties are doing. This is a unique challenge for Okeechobee, as during this very short period of time, we will essentially triple our population. Evacuation routes through our county can bottleneck, creating delays. So we have to work closely with our other county partners to make sure we understand their evacuation order timing and any other protective measures that they're working on at that time. With that, we can coordinate with our law enforcement agencies to help with traffic flow and make sure our sheltering is going to be adequate for the potential evacuees coming into our county. So with that being said, for us, really, when we think about the steps, resources, and evacuation planning, it all ties back to communication and coordination.
Shane, could I add on that a little bit?
Absolutely, go
So this is a little bit of my thunder because I think there's going to be a question a little bit on the end about resources. But unfortunately, it's for emergency managers, it's the business of planning for the worst case scenarios that we see to where majority of Florida would be impacted by the same system and everybody's asking for the same thing. The nice part is here in Florida, or it's the nice and unfortunate part as well, every county's experienced some version of a hurricane recently, some version of an evacuation recently, to where they know their resources, they've built up their resources because they've learned from best practices in their own agencies and other agencies. And even at the state of Florida level, we're requesting more and more resources every year, it seems like, to make sure we're prepared for the next season and more stocked up. We're getting bigger warehouses. We're gearing to move into a brand new warehouse in Auburndale and Polk County that's going to be larger and bigger to hold way more resources than we've ever held before compared to 5-10 years ago. So it's something to where we're all playing for those worst case scenarios and making sure we're prepared to help you in the community.
Thank you, Mason. Billy?
It's a standard emergency manager practice. There's 4 things the way we prioritize. First is life safety, second is property preservation, and then economic and environmental concerns. Governmental, not your economic concerns. So I'm saying that to say that after the storm, everyone's need becomes an emergency. I was working Hurricane Francis. You guys remember Francis? That was one of our direct hits here. And I wasn't in this position. I was working the phones. And the most frequent, we restricted sale of alcohol during that time. And the most frequent call I got was, when can I buy beer? It's not an emergency, So just kind of keep that in mind as we're like setting up our resources and readying our response. When is my cable gonna come on is not as important as Mrs. Jones has floodwaters surrounding her house and needs to get out. So please be patient with us and know that we have all of you in mind, and that's the way that we will prioritize.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is going to St. Lucie County. Oscar, how do you ensure that vulnerable populations such as the elderly, disabled, or those without reliable transportation are taken into account in evacuation and sheltering operations?
One thing that emergency managers are good at is what we do is partnerships. We partner with different agencies, both locally, with our neighbors in neighboring counties, national organizations. That's what we do all year long, is we're partnering, we're having conversations, we're creating plans, taking into consideration not just the vulnerable population, but the entire population of the county. Every time we activate shelters, we activate a special needs shelter. When we activate that special needs shelter, we have transportation already arranged. We know the agencies that are going to provide that transportation for those of you who need it. We have backup transportation agencies, and they're big. The MV Transit, the ART buses that you guys see driving around town, that's our primary transportation service. Then we have the school district, who we partner with. They provide secondary transportation with their school buses. Then we have our Veteran Services Division. They have buses as well. And then there's private organizations and nonprofit organizations that also have buses. So transportation is one of those things that we just plan on, and we constantly have those conversations, who's doing what, who's primary, and we have representation within the EOC when we're activated so that we can make sure that the transportation gets to where it needs to be. Milton, as a primary example, we had to send buses out there, both from the school district and from those ART buses, to get people out of rising floodwaters and over to the shelters. So the planning that we do all year long includes everybody, including vulnerable populations.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. Anybody else want to tack on to that one? Okay. All right, number 6, Mason, I think this is the one we were talking about. This one goes to Florida Division of Emergency Management. What are some common misconceptions or mistakes people make when preparing for hurricanes, and how can we address these in public education efforts?
So, actually, one of the things when I got this question, one of my bullet points, Billy kind of stole the thunder, but it was a really good point I want to make again. Know your zone and know your home. It's really, really big thing to where some people don't know that they're in a flood zone, and some people don't even know that they're in an evacuation zone. And the unfortunate thing is, this isn't the county or state's fault. This is somewhat on the federal side. When they made the flood zone lettering, it's somewhat similar to what the evacuation zones are. And I believe here in St. Lucie, y'all have a Zone A and a Zone B.
Yes.
So you can have like a flood zone AE to where it could be very similar. I encourage everybody, you can probably go over to St. Louis County's booth and ask the question, or go online and Google it, and you can figure out this information. But know your zone, know your home. Am I in an evacuation zone? Because if one of the counties orders an evacuation and they say Zone A, oh, I know I'm in Zone A. I need to make sure I'm evacuating if I wasn't already evacuating. Some really important things to remember. And we also all know, you may not be in a flood zone, but I know the house down my road, that yard always floods. They always flood. It can be a summer thunderstorm and it always floods. That may be only a couple inches of rainfall. Think about it to where if we have a larger tropical system, weather system that's coming in, putting way more rain down, how is that flooding going to look different? To where even if you think, I may not be in the best situation, try and remove yourself and try and protect yourself at all costs. Because the last thing that we want to do is have somebody stuck inside a house while it's flooding, while storms make an impact to our area, and we're trying and come save you either during or after and try and do a rescue. It's a very dangerous situation that we saw a lot this past year with Helene, when it skirted up the coast of Florida to go to the Big Bend, but all of the West Coast got major storm surge, and a lot of people weren't anticipating it. So make sure, to kind of tie it all back to it, listen to your local emergency management officials. They know they're having conversations with the National Weather Service, they're having conversations with the state, with the National Hurricane Center, all trying to figure out how is this going to pan out for us? What are going to be some of the impacts that we're going to see? So if they're saying, hey, we're calling evacuations for Zone A and B, you need to take that into serious consideration and follow those orders because they do not take them lightly. So that'll be my plug right there.
Thank you, Mason. Anybody else have anything on that one?
Great minds think alike, Mason.
There you go.
All right, the next one's for City of Port St. Lucie. Can you share how partnerships between local government agencies, nonprofits, and businesses have strengthened hurricane preparedness and response efforts?
Sure, it's kind of the same answer that I had before. Today we're getting together, right, all of us as emergency managers and you residents, and we're talking and we're saying, these are our recommendations. Think about your personal circumstances and what you need to do to prepare. It's the same conversations with businesses and not-for-profits, except businesses and not-for-profits during a storm, and it's not just storms, emergencies, whatever. Our best partners during COVID weren't in the business. Our best partners were medical professionals, because we don't do medicine, but we needed people that were medical professionals to advise us, and then not-for-profits and houses of worship to give us grounds to get our residents vaccinated. This was before vaccination became very controversial. Now it's a different story, but back then that's a good example of the public being us and the private partnerships with businesses and not-for-profits. Same thing today, we're talking to our not-for-profits, we're talking to our businesses. So for not-for-profits, it's what can you bring to the table? I mean, we have some houses of worship where the average age of the congregants there are 70. So we're not gonna ask them to load people's trunks with cases of water. That would be silly. But what can you do? Maybe they can help with sheltering, maybe they can help with preparation and distribution of food, so kind of know what our nonprofits and our businesses have to offer. We have some big businesses here that, you know, create plenty of food. They have giant warehouses stacked with water and other supplies that we might not get in a quick manner because of impacts from the storm to local roads. So we might need to lean on those businesses, and they're here. They've offered their assistance before, and I'm sure they will again if needs be. So short answer is just talk before we're in the cone is the time to have those conversations.
All right, thank you, Billy. Sally, the next one's for Martin County. What are the biggest challenges when it comes to maintaining critical infrastructure such as power, water, medical services during and after a hurricane?
Well, prior to a hurricane, prior to the beginning of hurricane season, usually, we sit down with Florida Power and Light, because, you know, that's we all want our power on, right? That's the priority. And we identify our critical facilities, and I can just name a few off the top of my head that I think are the most critical, which is power lines, hospitals, fire departments, and our shelters during the storm. So it's really important that we have redundancy of power and generators in all of those places, especially our hospitals. But I think we've been doing a lot of, I think throughout the Treasure Coast, we've been really trying to harden our infrastructure more. Like when you see, or you might even complain in your neighborhood that they're doing all this digging, that, you know, they're putting the power lines underground. That's what we want, right? We don't want them over our houses anymore, because we're trying to harden that infrastructure. I know in Martin County, at every major intersection, we have generators at our streetlights. So we have redundancy just to protect our critical infrastructure. So that's we're protecting our critical infrastructure, and that's protecting our residents as well.
Anybody else want to jump on that one? Okay. Karen, next one's served to you, Okeechobee County. How has the changing climate affected hurricane preparedness and response plans for the Treasure Coast? Are there any new strategies being implemented to deal with more intense storms?
So I think a lot of people, when you think about climate change and those type of things, there's a lot of different things that come to mind. But one of the biggest things that comes to mind that we hear a lot about during hurricane season is rapid intensification, especially when we think about the Gulf. We go to the storm, we go to the bed one night, it was a tropical storm, we wake up the next morning, it's a Cat 2 hurricane, and we're like, Shazam, what just happened over the last 8 hours? So what happens is that a lot of people, when they went to bed, they were thinking, you know what, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to see what the weather looks like, see what the radar looks like, and then maybe we'll make some decisions from there on how we want to handle this. And one of the things to kind of think about is, particularly with this last hurricane season, Hurricane Milton strengthened 90 miles per hour within 24 hours between October 6th and October 7th. So that really underscores how quickly these storms intensify. So one of the things that we are really wanting to promote and emphasize is have a plan, have your disaster preparedness kit ready to go, because when you go to bed and you're thinking, you know what, tropical storm, we're good, and you wake up the next morning and now you're pressed to make immediate decisions, what plans do you have in place? What food, what water, what resources, what medications have you already gathered? Because when you wake up that next morning, you have to make those immediate decisions. How can you lean forward? How can you go on and decide, you know what, we're going to evacuate, where we're going? So that's very challenging when you want to think about what resources that you want to have for you and your family, but also what are you going to do? What are your plans? And for us, even as emergency managers, planning is just as important. We have to have those relationships and those plans in place with all of our community partners, the school board, the fire, EMS, law enforcement agencies, and also American Red Cross or anybody that supports us during evacuation or sheltering decisions. Last year during Hurricane Milton, at the last minute, Okeechobee County had to open an additional shelter because of all the impacts that we were already getting. Due to the planning that we already had in place, the school board was able to open another shelter almost immediately. Law enforcement was able to support that right away, and American Red Cross was able to quickly mobilize and come in and help open up that additional shelter as well because of some of the pre-planning that we already had in place with that. So these relationships, these plans, these resources that we have already gathered in advance is what helps us be able to step back, adjust, and make some of those decisions based on what the community is needing to do for their safety. So kind of going back to what Mason said, thinking about flooding in that area. And it's like when you wake up the next day and now they're projecting an additional 4 to 6 inches of rain, that may change if you're going to stay at home or evacuate. So with us, being positioned to help support those last minute changes is very important. Now, when we think about planning ahead, when we, with climate change, there's a couple of other things to think about. We had talked about the Know Your Zone piece and what flooding, what communities are susceptible to flooding. So those maps are updated regularly. We look at long-term climate predictions, and we're also looking at sea level rise as well also. All of those factors play back into each other, and that's going to affect how you, as a citizen, is going to make a decision on whether you're going to shelter or whether you're going to evacuate. But that also helps us lean forward as well also on potentially the number of shelters that we need to open. Where are safe shelters to open? Because what we have to do also is when we look at where our shelters are, which is primarily in schools right now, we need to go back with the school system and we have to look, are our shelters in a safe location? Are our shelters going to flood? Are they at risk for flooding? Is the access routes or egress routes susceptible to flooding as well? Because we don't want to put a community in a location to where it's going to flood or we're cut off and we cannot make access. So even just from our perspective as emergency managers, protecting you as a community, life safety is one of our highest priorities. So sheltering is very important, but the other piece of that also is evacuation routes. Because when we look at sea level rise and we look at inland flooding as well also, because here in the state of Florida, we have a lot of canals, we have a lot of natural draining rivers and creeks, so all of that water is going to have to go somewhere. So do we have any of our evacuation routes that could potentially be impacted as well also? Because if so, we have to get that messaging out to you as a community. And that's why it's so important for everyone to know how you're going to get your messaging, and also for us as emergency managers to know how we're going to share that messaging with you. Because we want to make sure if you are evacuating, it is a safe route, and you're going to be able to get to where you want to get to. So that's a couple of things that we do look at. The other thing that we're doing when we're talking about preparing for climate change is what are those community projects that we can take on, whether it's changing our drainage system so communities flood less or we can stop flooding all the way around. What about changing our routes for our roads or raising our roads or changing our road structure? These are huge projects and it does take time. However, those are the conversations that we're having with our local road and bridge, with Department of Transportation, with planning and zoning, because we have to look at our shelters. Are we strengthening our shelters? Are we hardening our shelters? Where we have our firefighters, law enforcement, road and bridge, are the places that they're sheltering in to be ready to respond after the storm, are they in a safe location? We have to make sure their building is safe and that right afterwards they're going to be able to get on the road to start those response efforts to get out into the community. So we look at those projects, what can we do to decrease flooding and harden our structures as well? So there's a lot of different pieces that go into that, and again, a lot of it is built on those public-private relationships that start well in advance of us having to utilize our plans.
Thank you, Karen. The next one for City of Port St. Lucie. In the aftermath of a hurricane, how do emergency managers assess damage and prioritize recovery efforts?
Okay. It's a little technical, but I'll break it down. There's two kinds of damage we assess. Public, meaning government-owned, that's the roads, traffic lights, stormwater canals, things like that. And then there's individual, yours, your homes, your property. How damaged was that? So, sorry, that's African dust. So we have damage assessment teams of like trained professionals, like for the individual, for the public, we send out licensed building inspectors to go and check damage on your homes, damage on your property, and that's communicated up to the state and up to FEMA. And then they give us resources. Well, they'll send resources if needed to meet your needs. They're very minimal, and as Oscar said before, it is changing. The role that FEMA played, and I don't know what it'll be right now. I just know it's going to change. We haven't been told yet. I wouldn't depend too much on them, and even last year I wouldn't, because the most you'd get is like $40,000 total, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's really not. So again, have good insurance, do what you can for, it's about being self-sufficient. And for the public, I mean, that's kind of what, that's our focus, individuals, we assess, we see what's going on, we figure out what we need. Maybe we need temporary housing sent down, maybe we need, more supplies, more food, water, et cetera, than we'd originally thought. So that's all part of the IA, individual assessments. Public assistance, we look at our damages with the damage assessment teams, get a dollar figure together, report that to Mason's organization, and then they report it to the Fed. Usually they'll get their checks cut beforehand, and then that pours down. Sounds like a swift process. It's not. You're talking like months or years to get everything back in order. So we plan, we prepare, we train our teams now, so when it happens, we're all ready to go and do what we got to do and get us all up and running as soon as possible.
Thank you, Billy. I wanted to add one thing to that one myself. I'm glad he brought up about, what FEMA can provide you for assistance is very minimal. Okay, let's say your home's worth $300,000. That's what the PVA, or not PVA, what do they call them here? I'm from the Midwest, so we call them property valuation administrators. Here it's the who
Property
evaluates-
appraiser?
Property appraiser. So the property appraiser says it's worth $300,000. It gets destroyed, completely destroyed, and you don't have insurance. If, and it's a big if you qualify for every single FEMA program available, and you won't, but if you did, the maximum cap on it is it raises with the price index every year, but it's like $42,700 this year. So if you think you can replace your $300,000 home with $42,700, which you won't get because you won't qualify for all of it, you need to really make sure you keep your home insured. Make sure you have, wind coverage. Make sure you have flood insurance. Because same thing, if you have a regular homeowner's policy, like we all have, that doesn't include flood coverage, and your home floods, your insurance goes, we're not paying you a dime. They give you nothing. And there you go. You're left with $40,000 and an inch of water in your home. 1 inch in your home averages between $25,000 and $35,000 to fix. So just keep that in mind. The insurance industry, I mean, it's awful. I know my insurance went up like crazy. I'm sure everybody in here has year after year. But it's the only way you're going to be made whole after a disaster. FEMA cannot make you whole. All right, I'm going to move on to the next.
Oh,
Sorry.
can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So in regards to recovery, we think about your recovery as you and your home. We also think about the recovery of the businesses. We think about the recovery of getting our schools open, but we talk about recovery of kind of getting back to that normal life, a new and improved life. So with that, there's a lot of things for us as emergency managers that we are doing for recovery. One of the highest and priorities that we're working on is going to be getting your power back on, your utilities back on, and making sure you have a safe place to stay during this time. As y'all are well aware, getting students back in school is a huge effort and a huge priority, right? So one of the things that we may have to look on is where's different locations for sheltering for our community during this time. So if you hear of, a school as a shelter, they're closing that school as a shelter to get kids back in there, just kind of be aware of what else is going on in the community. It's very important that for you as a homeowner and also wanting to get back to your normal life and the resources that are available to you, the counties will put out messaging on resource centers that are going to be open to you for you to go to get information on these resources that they're talking about up here for filing for insurance or what assistance is available to you. And even for businesses, that goes into your small business loans, your small business associations, Chamber of Commerce, what resources are available for business as well, because businesses take those impacts too. And we rely on those businesses as part of our community, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's picking up pizza on a Friday night to go home so we don't have to cook that night, or whatever that is. So for us as emergency managers, We do have a lot of information that we're going to start pushing out, so making sure you have those different ways to get the messaging is going to be very important, because we are here to support you, and we just want to make sure we're getting all that information out to you so you can make the best decisions you can.
All right, thank you so much, Karen, for adding on to that. She's exactly right, that's very important. So we have to be out of this room in 5 minutes to turn it over and get everything broken down for the next one, which starts at 12:15. So I'm going to do one more of these questions. Y'all can be on the spot. I'm going to ask one of these questions and give me a one-sentence answer. All of you, all five of you, give me a one-sentence answer to answer that question. No, that one you can't do in one sentence. There's no way. All right, here we go. I think you can do this one in one sentence. All right, we'll start with Billy and work our way down. So how do you ensure that resources such as food, water, and shelter are sufficiently stocked to handle back-to-back hurricanes impacting the Treasure Coast? Because as we saw last year, you know, you had Helene, Milton, and I forgot the other one. They were all came within a couple of weeks of each other. So what if that were to all be coming to us? How do you do that?
For individuals or for government?
This is for individuals. How do you ensure resources such as food, water, and shelter are sufficiently stocked?
Get a kit. That's it, right? Get a kit, have your stuff now. Go shopping like, I don't know when we're gonna get the Florida tax free weekend, hopefully soon. I wouldn't wait. Get your kits now, get all your supplies. I would say at least 1 week's worth, more than 1 sentence.
All right, Sally?
Build good relationships with our vendors, contractors.
Very
Should
good.
resupply.
Oscar?
One sentence, huh?
Well, it could be a run-on sentence.
How about one word? Preparation. Be prepared.
Preparation. Mason? I almost called you Miles.
It's okay, I can go by whatever. It was already talked about, prepared ahead of time. We're here for you if you need stuff afterwards. MREs, water, food, whatever. We have that stocked up and prepared if you need it afterwards, but try and be prepared ahead of time.
That was a paragraph.
And Karen?
Yes, it all starts at the local level. Be prepared, you at home. However, nonprofit organizations, they are looking out for you as well also, and that is their business, is to be able to make sure that they can support you. So we think about the Treasure Coast Food Bank and those places like that as well. So we communicate with them, and we make sure they have the resources they need.
Great. Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate you coming to our event and sharing your knowledge and experience with our residents on emergency management and preparedness. So I need the raffle. Oh, there it is.
And for those of you who had questions that we said we'd get to at the end, we'll be out at our tables at the booth, so feel free to come by and visit us and ask those questions. We'll have conversations with you.
All right, so we're going to draw, how many? Three raffle tickets for 3 drawings. So the first one will be a disaster preparedness bundle donated by Home Depot in St. Lucie West. It includes a Home Depot bucket, work gloves, mini flashlight, headlamp flashlight, a 25-foot extension cord, and Cobra walkie-talkies with an emergency weather radio. And survey says, I don't see numbers on, oh, they're on this side. 1183651. That's 1183651. There we go. Congratulations, sir. All right, so the next one, the second and third will be for Midland Emergency Weather Radios. Sally, I'll let you draw the second one. Okay, this one is upside down. It is 660160. That's 660160. Congratulations, sir. All right, and Oscar, you'll draw for the other weather radio. All right, this one is 660163. 660163. Gentlemen in the back, congratulations. All right, remember the tickets are only good for this drawing, so you can throw your tickets away. When you come in for the next presentation, you'll get a new ticket. Our next presentation is at 12:15, and it'll be by the St. Lucie County Fire District, so come on back.